Hello and welcome to Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. And this version of Citizens Hour is supported by the National Endowment for Democracy, NED. I am Veronique Njai. Across the Sahel, military takeovers, insecurity, political transitions, and growing public frustration with democratic institutions have triggered one of the biggest governance debates on the African continent. Countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have experienced dramatic political changes, including military-led transitions, the formation of the Alliance of Sahel States, and the withdrawal from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. Supporters of these changes argue that traditional democratic systems have failed to deliver stability and development, including security in these regions. Others warn that the region may be experiencing democratic decline. So today we ask, is the Sahel experiencing the end of democracy or the rebirth of a new governance system? To unpack this, I am joined by three distinguished guests: Professor Stefano, a comparative politics expert and professor at the University of Pavia in Italy. I am also joined by Marie Josiane Ga, project coordinator of WADEMOS, that is the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network. Also, Boniface Dolani, director of surveys at Afrobarometer and an associate professor at the University of Political Science and Government at the University of Malawi. So, to begin, military leaders in parts of the Sahel have increasingly defended their actions as necessary corrections to the failing political systems in the region. One of the strongest and most debated narratives has come from Burkina Faso's transitional leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who has publicly argued that democracy in its current form is not suitable for African realities. Take a listen to this excerpt.
People need to forget about democracy, and that in itself is a challenge. Let's speak the truth. Democracy is not for us. The kind of democracy being presented to us is not something we are interested in. We don't even want it. Normally, if someone comes to talk to an African about democracy in that way, you should walk away. Democracy kills. Is that what we want? Democracy is slavery. There is no real democracy in this world. They apply it when it suits them, and to impose it, they kill. That kind of democracy, we don't want it. May God protect us from it. We are focused on our reconquest, our rebuilding, and our revolution.
Sur notre refondation et sur la révolution.
That was Burkina Faso's transitional leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Marie, I'll begin with you. When leaders openly question liberal democracy in this way, what does this tell us about the current political mood across parts of the Sahel?
It's a very important and sensitive issue that Captain Traoré has raised. This kind of speech needs to be approached with nuance. When leaders like Ibrahim Traoré question democracy, we need to ask, what exactly are they rejecting? Because in reality, I don't think citizens, they reject the idea of democracy itself, but they are questioning how that democracy is practiced and how that democracy, provide the benefits for the citizens.
Professor Stefano, how should we interpret this kind of rhetoric from political leaders from a comparative point of view?
I think there are serious issues behind this situation, serious frustration, structural problems. But I think there is also something a bit more ambitious in what we have heard in the words of Traoré. I think there is clearly an idea of something else beyond democracy. He talked about revolution at the end of his speech. So he's clearly, in my view, figuring out a system which is not necessarily a better democracy or a good democracy, but is talking about something that could be actually a different system. And maybe this different system can be much better for democracy, who knows that? But he's not simply, let's say, focusing on the problem with real democracy as it has been presented as it has been working thus far, but is also, in my view, giving it to a speech a kind of ideological connotation that goes beyond the notion of democracy itself and presents aspects that do not simply point to a temporary suspension of democracy, but to a plan to build something different.
I know you did mention structural issues and the fact that they're probably searching for a better system. However, our team gathered reactions from citizens in Niger and Mali, which are part of the Sahel countries that we're talking about, regarding democracy, governance, and the political direction of the region at the moment. However, many people approached were reluctant to openly speak or comment on the issue because of the sensitivity surrounding political discussions in that region. In Niger, however, citizens were asked whether they believe they are currently living in a democracy and why. Take a listen.
Depuis les événements du 26 juillet, on n'est plus en démocratie dans la mesure où
Since the events of July 26, we are no longer in a democracy, in the sense that we no longer feel that legality, that conformity with the constitution. We are under a regime of coup plotters who are already forcing us to merely observe events whether we like them or not. We are merely observing. I really don't feel free because today I wonder whether I have freedom of expression to the extent that I even wonder whether what I am about to say won't harm my reputation. I am already forced to weigh my words, and yet in this regard I would simply say that we are not under the rule of law, which means we are not under a democratic regime. Today, the citizens of Niger are merely observers.
les citoyens nigériens sont seulement des observateurs.
On se sent en démocratie parce que qui parle de démocratie.
We feel we live in a democracy because when we talk about democracy, we're talking about fundamental freedoms. And fundamental freedom belongs to the people. The people are the only ones who decide who will govern and who cannot govern. And the people support the current regime. In other words, it is government of the people by the people. And the people in Niger today support the government. Even though life is difficult, we know that this is a sacrifice we have made. Even though at the moment we can't say that things are going well financially, but when it comes to freedom, we are free. We think what we want, and that's what we want. And the current government stands with the people.
Et le gouvernement actuel, il est avec le peuple.
Il nous faudrait faire une prise de conscience.
We need to raise our awareness so that we can truly take control of our environment, our society, and our country. There are some flaws with our democracy. It's true. There are some flaws in their approach. But those flaws don't mean we should give up. It's true. There is famine. We are hungry. Everything is expensive in Niger. But we will deal with these shortcomings. It's up to us to close these gaps. But how? By supporting this movement.
La démocratie en tant que telle, vraiment.
Democracy as such, we are not experiencing it at the moment. We are not experiencing it. There are a lot of things that are missing at the moment. We could mention freedom of expression and several other things, really. We are not free to express ourselves, to say what we want. If we dare to make certain comments, we already know what awaits us. That's kind of it.
C'est un peu ça.
Marie Josenga, how would you, or what would be your reaction to the comments that were made by Nigerians about the current situation in their country?
I think it's very important to take into consideration those different perspectives. My reaction to that is to acknowledge that in the Sahel being a very sensitive region, exposed to a high level of insecurity, I think democracy in the Sahel could and should have been practiced differently than what it was practiced before the authoritarian regime came. But I think we must be clear about one thing, for me, is that citizens are definitely not rejecting democracy as an ideal. So what many are questioning is how democracy has been implemented and experienced. So, for many citizens, democracy became too focused on elections, too dominated by elites, and too disconnected from everyday's realities.
All right, Professor Stefano, from a comparative perspective again, should we interpret the current developments in regions like the Sahel as a genuine decline of democracy?
Well, this is very difficult because it is actually not a phenomenon that we can observe just in one region. I think in many regions of the world, we have a similar situation. And we have a similar situation in the West as well. I would like, although the economic and political history are very different, we are in a situation of big dissatisfaction with democracy in the West as well, or with democracy or with the kind of governance we have been experiencing in recent years. So this feeling is not something peculiar to the region. So when we have to make an assessment about whether this is a genuine decline of democracy or not, it becomes a very, very complex problem.
Meanwhile, in Mali, citizens were asked a broader question, and the question is democracy still the best form of governance? Here are some of their reactions.
Le meilleur système demeure la démocratie et jusqu'à preuve du contraire.
Democracy remains the best system until proven otherwise. In this social contract, Jean-Jacques Rousseau stated that if there were a people of God, it would govern itself democratically. So this means that until proven otherwise, we may not see a system as perfect as democracy. And it's not just about elections. Democracy is about transparency. Democracy is accountability. So there is a set of principles in place. Democracy is individual liberty. Democracy is a rule of law. Democracy is a separation of powers. Therefore, democracy is opposite of arbitrariness. The march towards democracy is inevitable. Democracy is for the well-being of the people.
Est inévitable. La démocratie, c'est pour le bien-être des populations.
Moi, je pense que le système de gouvernance.
I think the system of governance that is best for all of us is democracy, because this system allows everyone to express themselves. It gives everyone the opportunity to find their place in society, whether economically, socially, culturally, or otherwise. So we need democracy, because the law of the strongest has never benefited a people in the long term. It also ends in chaos, which is not what we want. So we need democracy so that everyone can express themselves in equality and with mutual acceptance.
L'égalité et l'acceptation de tous.
Pour la démocratie, il faudrait quand même adapter, c'est-à-dire ce système de gouvernance.
Democracy, however, requires that this system of governance be adapted to the reality of the country, to the reality of the movement, and to the reality on the ground. Because democracy is a system of governance that is practiced in many African countries, but we must not forget that it is the root cause of much of the unrest in those African countries. Democracy certainly entails freedom of expression, freedom of the press, and a multi-party system. But we must acknowledge that democracy is at the root of many conflicts, because it is within democracy that we have seen poorly organized elections, rigged results, and leaders who amend the constitution to stay in power. European countries that are truly democratic have each tried to adapt democracy to the reality of their own country. So regardless of the system of governance, in my view, it must still be adopted to the reality of the country in question.
Le système de gouvernance, pour moi, il faut quand même adapter à la réalité du pays en question.
All right, those were the voices of Malians regarding what they make of democracy in their country. Mr. Boniface, or Professor Boniface, I'll start with you. What is your reaction to the voices of Malians regarding what they make of democracy? And from Afrobarometer's point of view, do you have any studies or findings that suggest that citizens are becoming more open to alternative governance systems if democracy fails to deliver?
Clearly, from the sentiments of the citizens of Mali, democracy is not perfect, but that the alternatives are much, much worse than the imperfections of a poorly performing democracy. From our surveys, we do see that over time, this proportion of African citizens that have been saying they support democracy has been declining over time. In our most recent surveys, we only found that about just 2/3 of African citizens still express preference for democracy over alternatives. I mean, 2/3 is still quite a strong support, and I think Africans, when you compare to other global regions, still profess, I think, support and preference for democracy compared to alternatives. I think from the citizens, I think from Mali, what is clear is that democracy is failing to deliver on its promises. It's not democracy itself, and I think the danger is to conflate the challenges that are there with democracy.
Delani, based on your research or surveys, what is citizens' reactions or citizens' sentiments regarding ECOWAS, especially the exit of these countries from the regional body?
We are yet, I think, to survey in these countries to see what their sentiments are. Yes, it's support for ECOWAS, not just in the 3 Sahel countries that have since left, has been declining over time. ECOWAS is just one of the institutions that doesn't seem to step in and help them in their times of need. ECOWAS, and indeed most of our regional blocs, are considered really just like clubs of dictators. They are there to defend, one another, to defend the leadership in the different countries rather than advancing the interests of the ordinary man and woman on the streets.
Just say we are witnessing an end of democracy in the Sahel.
I think it is very premature to say we're seeing an end to democracy in the Sahel region. I think what we're seeing are frustrations with the democracies that are imperfect and perhaps a leadership that is failing to deliver.
Is it possible to have a system or an alternative that would satisfy both the citizens and the leaders?
Well, I don't know, but if this is the case, it means if you have an alternative that will satisfy both, it means that actually you have a model. You have something that can work not only in one country, but in many other countries. The success of alternative experience can push people in neighboring countries to experience this model as something viable. I think countries affect each other in their history. Hybrid regimes. This looks like an alternative. This is something that is taking force, that is, let's say, building in the long run as a serious alternative. I'm not saying that it's better than democracy. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that there are forces. And I think there is another alternative. We should not forget that in the last 20 years, a country emerged as a leading economic power in the world and as a growing political force, which is China. And China is establishing relationship with many countries in the world, and they are not trying to export their model, but obviously their influence can push many people to explore alternatives and to consider, especially in the management of economic issues, to consider alternatives to what we had in the past. This is an alternative which is growing in prestige, and at least in China, it seems that it is really, let's say, providing a model that is satisfactory for both the people and the leadership, because Chinese people are among those people that are more satisfied of their government.
Mary, is it possible to build an African model of democracy while still preserving accountability, pluralism, and the rights of citizens?
Very good question. I'm optimistic about it that we can build an African model. Not to say that the current model is not working, because there is this debate about foreign democracy being a foreign and imported concept, that it doesn't work in Africa. That's not what we are saying, but we are saying that we can have a democracy that fits the African model, the African realities. So it should mean adapting those democratic principles to our realities, our histories, and at its core, there should be participation, accountability, representation, and legitimacy.
Professor Boniface, can alternative governance systems maintain legitimacy without elections and political pluralism, like in the case of the Sahel?
I'm always hesitant to think that Africans are looking for something different from what obtains elsewhere in the world, at least based on these surveys that have been done across the entire continent. I wanted to just highlight this, that what Africans really want are not any different from what citizens in other parts of the world want from democracy. And indeed, what the meaning that they give to democracy are quite similar to what other citizens the world over are also looking for. So Africans really want the same things from their government, just like other citizens, but also wanting governments that can deliver for them. So whether we want to have a new system, or granted we are latecomers, I think, as a continent to democracy, but it doesn't then mean that we attach, I think, we have different attachments or different meanings to democracy compared to the rest of the world.
We are about to wrap up this conversation, but before that, Marie, what should democracy advocates and civil society actors in West Africa or the Sahel prioritize moving forward?
I would say that their role is threefold. We need a bridge between citizens and the states. The Sahel countries, where many citizens feel disconnected from political institutions, CSOs help to amplify citizens' voice and facilitate dialogue and ensure that local concerns, reach decision makers. Their role is also essential in defending those democratic principles and the civic space. Not only monitoring elections, but promoting transparency, advocating for human rights, holding governments accountable. Even in difficult contexts, they act as guardians of accountability. The last one is on rebuilding trust and social cohesion, because given the current crisis of legitimacy in the Sahel, CSOs play a key role.
Professor Stefano, if you would have a recommendation for the Sahel, what would it be? Just under a minute.
Well, it's very difficult to focus on a region which has its own peculiarities, but actually guarantee of physical integrity and basic rights of survival to the people is the main challenge, and it's one that will determine also what kind of political system will be built in the future.
Professor Delany, looking ahead, what conditions are necessary for democratic systems in the Sahel to build public trust and legitimacy? Again, just under a minute as we are wrapping up the conversation.
So maybe how the international community can work together to help and address, I think, this problem of insurgency, I think could be the first step. Then, of course, building stronger institutions. When leaders feel that they are the only people who can lead their countries, that if they leave, then their countries will fall apart. I think that shows that the institutions are weak. Institutions should be stronger than individuals.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Boniface. Today's discussion reminds us that the debate around democracy in the Sahel is no longer simply about elections. It's about legitimacy, governance, public trust, security, accountability, and the relationship between citizens and the state. Whether the region is experiencing democratic decline or political transformation remains contested. But what is undeniable is that the choices made today will shape the future of democracy and governance in West Africa in years to come. My sincere thanks to our guest, Professor Stefano from the University of Pavia in Italy, Boniface Delany of Afrobarometer and the University of Malawi, and Marie-Josée Nga of Wademos. Thank you so much for joining us on Citizens Hour.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to be with you today.
All right, thank you. I am Veronique Njaya, and this is how we wrap it up for Citizens Hour, Episode 3, supported by the National Endowment for Democracy, NED. Have a great day.
Citizens R is evolving as the WADR's partnership with NET continues. This April, your NET Democracy and Governance program is going to the Sahel. We will focus on Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other West African countries, including Benin, Togo, Nigeria, and the Gambia. Bolder conversations, real voices, inclusive discussions. Let's talk democracy. Let's talk governance. Let's talk your truth. Citizens R Season 2 in partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, NET, on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM, Dakar.